As we've been reporting, demonstrators protesting today are showing their support for the pro-Trump rioters who stormed the Capitol building on January 6th. Their mission back in January was to stop the certification of the Electoral College vote and overturn the 2020 presidential election results. Former President Trump and Republican allies pushed the debunked conspiracy theory of a rigged election leading up to the riot. Some still perpetuate it today. New polling shows roughly 6 in 10 Republicans say the former president does not have any responsibility for the January 6th attack. The poll also finds 27% of GOP supporters say it's somewhat or very likely that Mr. Trump will be reinstated as president by next year. To discuss the state and future of the Republican Party, I want to bring in Kevin Sheridan and Jennifer Lim. Kevin is a former spokesman for the Republican National Committee, and Jennifer is the founder and executive director of Republican Women for Progress. It's great to have you both with me today. So the former president has not stayed silent since leaving office, and he continues to push misinformation about the 2020 election as he may run again in 3 years. Kevin, what is support like now for the former president when it comes to voters, Republican politicians, and those working in the RNC?
Well, the RNC is a very different place now than it was 20 years ago when I was there, and that we can thank McCain-Feingold and campaign finance reform for that, which has really weakened the party structure for both parties. But as far as the former president goes, he still has he's got a base of support that's never gonna leave him. But he's not getting younger, and there are potential rivals to him this time around. I think we saw that in some of the straw polls from around the country, that there's a lot of support for Ron DeSantis. There could be other emerging candidates, Tom Cotton, some other people that could emerge. That said, Donald Trump is still, if he wants it, is probably in the best position to get the nomination. But it's not going to be without a fight. It'll be controversial even within the Republican ranks.
Jennifer, I want to get your reaction to this. As Kevin said, there are lots of Republicans who say that the current state of the party doesn't really reflect their beliefs of what the GOP actually stands for. But when it comes to President Trump, he is really integrated throughout all of the party right now. A prominent Trump donor reportedly paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the January 6th rally preceding the riot. A former Trump campaign staffer's nonprofit organized today's event. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more, Jennifer, about what this says about Mr. Trump's influence over the party and likely staying power heading into the next election.
I think that's kind of the big question everybody is asking themselves heading into 2022 is what, we know Trump has this large base of followers, but what does his durability look like? The durability of this base. And I think that is something that we'll really want to look at in 2022, especially as, he's been getting involved in primaries. I think we've all seen Representative Gonzalez's, he's not running for re-election again. And I think, the results of him getting involved in these primaries, I think we'll really find out what this base durability is in 2022. And, I mentioned Gonzalez. I look at the rally kind of through that lens. We have a very popular young congressman stepping down, and it is in large part to all of this violence that we're seeing. And not only the violence that Trump is kind of allowing, but the silence from a lot of prominent Republicans. And I think for Republicans like myself, that's what's still truly damning, is even with something like January 6th, our Republican leaders in Congress can't really stand up and say this is wrong and this is not what the party stands for.
I want to follow up on that point, Jennifer, because I think it's a really important one, because the Democratic Party is not the feelings of maybe the most extremist left of the party, and one might argue that the Republican Party prior to this time period was not really reflective of the most extreme right. But at this point, it seems like the GOP members of Congress, at least, are very hesitant to criticize the most right members of the party. Some actually supported the January 6 rioters. And today's event organizers publicly invited all lawmakers to attend the protest. Still, it doesn't appear that any of them are planning to come. How are elected officials within the Republican Party trying to manage the power that the far right has currently over the party and where they see themselves?
I think you explained it perfectly, right? All of these lawmakers are trying to walk a line because they do want to keep getting votes from this Trump base. And this Trump base, isn't going to go anywhere in 2022, unfortunately. And I don't think, for the future of the Republican Party, they're really playing the right game here. Because as we've all heard, and particularly after the results of the 2020 census, these demographics that the Republican Party is relying on are dwindling. And they can stave off this with redistricting for a few years. But, when you see suburban women, continuing to help Democrats win elections, and you see the Republican Party losing people like Representative Gonzalez, I think all of these, unfortunately, we're never going to get enough of our Republican leaders at the same time to kind of have a backbone and say this can't be the future of the party. It's going to just come down to Republicans have to keep losing at the ballot box, and they have to keep losing with these key demographics that they need to win in the future.
Kevin, I wonder if you agree with what Jennifer's saying, and I'll bring up a specific example. In the democratically led House panel investigating the January 6 attack, there are two GOP members, including former top Republican Liz Cheney, who lost her leadership position because she was outspoken against this. So, Kevin, how much are Republican voters paying attention to this probe? What is the future of Congresswoman Liz Cheney in the Republican Party? And do you really think that Jennifer's right, that Republicans are going to continue losing at the ballot box before more leaders are willing to say within the Republican Party that this doesn't represent us?
Yeah, I partially agree with that, but the macro trends right now might not matter. I mean, Joe Biden is now way underwater. He's in the mid-30s with independent voters now for his approval rating. Wrong track numbers are way up. And the margins are very small in the House and Senate. So it's possible that Republicans could win back both houses. We're going to see what happens in Virginia with Youngkin and McAuliffe in a very tight race right now. So I agree that there are some difficult problems. Part of that is because the incentives for for members to just say wild things, to create a social media following, not be serious about getting anything done in Congress are all there, and we've seen this for 5-10 years, and it's getting worse. So. When you have weak parties who can't do anything about it, they're not going to expel anybody from the party. They can't do it. They just don't have the structures in place. People can just go raise their own money and keep their voice out there on social media and other types of media. So that's the dynamic we're living in. We can hope that the macro trends put responsible Republicans back into office in all of the key districts that we're seeing. We have seen some growth in minority support, but yeah, you guys are right that women in the suburbs are still a huge problem for Republicans. That's formally a part of our base, and it is just not looking good. So Afghanistan, I think, doesn't help Democrats at all, and the macro trends with COVID and the economy, if we see higher taxes and low growth, they may come back, but it's a challenge.
Well, Kevin, you're making the point that that if you're looking at short term, if you're an elected who's looking at your next election and this is working for you, you might not care about the health of the party in the next 10 or 20 years. And Kevin, I want to follow up with you also about the point that you made about President Joe Biden's approval ratings. Republican majority state legislatures have also taken aim at certain things that do not have wide popular support, don't have wide support among independent voters, and particularly those suburban women that you were talking about, including limiting abortion rights and voting rights, even including how American history can be taught in school. I'm going to ask you, Kevin, do you think that these changes are a good strategy for Republican leaders right now, seizing an opportunity to get things done that some element of the base wants to have happen? And do you think that will ultimately end up hurting the Republican Party in the long run?
Yeah, never underestimate the Republican Party to hurt itself. The Texas legislature, they may honestly believe that that was the right limit on abortion at 15 weeks, but they handed Democrats an issue. They just did, and it's now we've seen it in Virginia. Terry McAuliffe was talking about it the other night in his debate. That was not a live issue before this. That said, that issue is going to get another treatment when the Supreme Court rules on the Mississippi case. So who knows where that ends up, but on the other issues, I think they're more popular than you might be suggesting with independent voters. I think the schools are a big issue right now for parents all through the suburbs. They're not liking what they're seeing on some of their Zoom calls that they've been treated to over the last year. And we've seen it in Virginia. We've seen a very loud grassroots movement there. So as far as voter rights go, I think the Republican voters at least think that that's an unfair assessment of what's happening in Georgia and in other places. But the Republican Party can still hurt itself.
It's not popular. It's still galvanizing among Democrats, as you admit, Kevin, and it's still not popular among independents. But it has been. We are unfortunately out of time for this segment, but it has been such a pleasure speaking with both of you about what we're seeing right now and potential future trends in the Republican Party. Jennifer Lim, Kevin Sheridan, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.